This is the Prosperity Playbook, and we are 4 friends that have come together from different avenues of life, ages, and work backgrounds. Just sharing all the knowledge that we have learned over the years that hopefully will help you get through life a little bit easier. And today we're going to talk about, does the fairy tale exist with relationships?
I think this topic kind of came up for me when my daughter was really young and I was married, and like there was nothing really wrong in the marriage, but it wasn't like this like perfect fairy tale. And I just didn't know if it was supposed to be. And to be honest, I never really had any great relationship role models. I in fact had 0 people at that time that I really felt were a good relationship role model for me. My parents had been divorced when I was 3. My mom remarried right away, but it wasn't the greatest relationship. They're still married, but it's not like this great love affair or anything like that, you know. And my dad's been married and divorced a couple times, and I just didn't know anybody that I thought really had it together. And I thought, you know, I don't know if this is supposed to be how our marriage is. Is it supposed to be hard? Is it supposed to be perfect? Am I supposed to just be gaga and love every single day? And I just didn't know. And I was trying to figure out, like, is this where I'm supposed to stay? Or I just didn't want to be 50 or 60 years old, finally realizing like this isn't what it was supposed to be. And then at that point, trying to restart and maybe have wasted 20, 30, 40 years of my life. So I just didn't know. And that's kind of where this topic came up for me. And it's taken a lot of counseling and reading and, conversations with my spouse and friends and family and everybody else to try to kind of answer this question. So I thought it was a good topic for us to talk about together.
And I'm the poster child of having bad relationships.
Okay, well, tell us about that.
I have been divorced twice. I am married a 3rd time, and this one is going to have to stick. There are no options, but the reasons why the first 2 did not stick were not necessarily anything that I saw coming. I had told my first husband, and sorry if he ever is listening to this, don't ever cheat on me, just be done. And that is not what happened. And it was painful to find out. And we had a 2-year-old at the time who is now turning 23. And then I spent maybe 5 years on my own. Met somebody on eHarmony that looked great on paper. We had all the things that should make up a great relationship. And then I found out after we got married that he had a whole different side and learned what a narcissist was and a little bit of bipolar. So we had actually had that conversation in counseling. I think we went to 4 counselors. And that was just not going to work. There were a lot of things, but I did not want my son to see his mother treated that way. He was between 5 and 11 at that point. And amazingly, my son has turned out great. He has a good girlfriend, and he seems to be a happy, adjusted 23-year-old male that communicates pretty well.
That's awesome.
How about you, Britt?
I definitely learned a lot of things the hard way, very similar to what Renee said. I didn't have any good relationship role models. Pretty much all of the relationships that I saw, they probably shouldn't have been together. And so I took kind of the opposite route and became extremely codependent in every relationship that I was in, where I wanted to be kind of at their beck and call, wanted them to be at my beck and call, where if I call or text, you're immediately responding. I know exactly where you are and who you're with at any minute of any day. And I thought that that was healthy. I thought that that was a sign of a good, healthy, solid relationship. And it took years and years and years of being in very codependent relationships that were not healthy for the codependency that I was creating within them. And when I started dating Forrest, within the first few weeks of us dating, I asked him permission to go hang out with one of my best friends. And he said, will you sit down for a second? So I did. And he said, do not ever ask me permission to go hang out with your best friend. If you want to go hang out with your friends, you can tell me that you're going to do that. You can check to see if we have anything already planned, but do not ask me permission. If you want to go hang out with your friends, you want to go spend time with your family, you want to go play a game of volleyball, go do it. And I'm going to do the same. If I want to play video games with the boys, I'm not going to ask you permission to do so. And I remember just having this huge aha moment where I was like, this whole time it was supposed to be like this. But I'm so thankful to him for having that conversation with me, because that was the first of very, very many conversations. And I think that when it comes to relationships, that is the number one most important thing. Especially when we're looking at a life partner, spending a lot of time with somebody, we as humans are constantly evolving. I'm not going to be the same person in 10 years that I am to be, nor do I want to be the same person. And same with Forrest. He's going to be a very different person in 10 years. So figuring out how to love each other along that journey takes a lot of conversations.
I think that's a good
sounds so mature for a male, doesn't he?
It's impressive for sure. Well, and we were talking about this earlier, how sometimes we see, somebody says something about their significant other and you're like, man, why isn't mine like that? But it's not that, they all have their strengths and their maybe not strengths. But I think in general, most males that I have been in relationships with are not really great at that communication side of things. My husband comes from a family where you don't really talk about your issues and your grievances. You kind of just shove that shit down and you just keep rolling. And
my family's the exact same way.
Same.
It's hard for me. I'm a talker, obviously. I like to express my feelings. I like to hear what other people think and why they think that way and kind of get to the bottom on things. So that is one of the challenges that has been in my marriage. I will come to my husband and be like, I think we should set goals and we should do this and we should blah, blah, blah. And then he's like, yep.
You do that.
This literally happened yesterday on our way to dinner, and I was like, good talk, Russ. That's kind of our thing. I'm a huge planner and goals, and let's plan the future. And he's like, okay. It's one of those things that you just don't really know. But I do think, there are definitely things that are deal breakers, like you said, Courtney. I think it's important to know that. I am not of the mindset that every relationship has to last. It's a one and done, and you can never get out of it. Like you said, I don't want my daughter to see a relationship that's not a good example for her. I want her to see a good example. And to be clear, I actually think my husband and I have an amazing relationship now, and I hope we are that example for other people. That doesn't mean we're perfect. And like I said, it's taken a lot of conversations and counseling and books and things like that to get to that point. But I think one of the things for me was I realized relationships are kind of hard. Everything worth doing is hard. It's kind of like going to the gym. If you go in and half-ass it every day, you're not going to see much for results. So if you're just kind of there in your marriage or whatever relationship, you get out of it what you put into it, just like everything.
I tell people all the time when they're talking about getting divorced or breaking up, don't do it. Don't do it unless it is a deal breaker, because it is not fun to be single in this world.
No, I'm sure that's true. And I do think, on the flip side of that, I have definitely seen people in, abusive relationships or really, really unhealthy relationships that stay for that reason, because it's not easy. It's the devil you know versus the devil you don't. And I do think people should be empowered. If you are in some form of an abusive situation, whether that is verbally or physically or whatever that looks like, please be empowered to get out of there. It does take two people to make a relationship work. One thing I realized at one point was I don't get to control how Josh feels about me. I don't get to control his feelings. I can put out what I want as far as showing him how much I love him, but I can't actually choose how he's going to receive that. So that's, it's up to him to do that, and I can't be tied to the outcome. So for me, one of the things that used to be a huge issue for us was I was always looking for him to I think give me confidence, say nice things to me and build me up. And I think those are good, but I had to realize I had to love myself. And I know that sounds super cheesy and it's hard to say things like that, but until I was happy with who I was, there was no way he could ever say anything that would make me feel good enough to where I was in a good place. So
I think that's where a lot of my codependency came from, is I was looking for them to give me what I wasn't able to give myself. Exactly. And obviously now it looks a lot different than it used to because I have done the work to love myself and to work on the things about myself that I didn't love.
Right.
But kind of along those same lines, something that I really had to learn with Forrest, we have completely different love languages. Have you guys ever taken like a love language assessment?
Yeah.
Yes. I don't remember what mine was.
There's, what is it? Words of affirmation, physical touch, gifts, and what's the
Acts
other
of
one? Acts of service. Yeah. And I think it's really important to learn what your partner's love language is because I can be giving you all the love in the world that I deem to be love based on my love language. But if your love language is something completely different, you're not going to receive that the same way. So I do think that in a relationship, it's really important. Learn your partner's love language and then speak that language for them so that, if your love language is words of affirmation, if you need him to tell you that you're beautiful, even though he's like, you're beautiful, I don't need to say that. I need you to tell me that, that is you saying that you love me. And so I do think that it's important to have those conversations. And then if you're having a bad day, deep dive into your partner's love language and have them do the same. And I promise you'll feel so much better afterwards.
But I think you're right. I do think it has to be their language. And if you just assume that your language is the same as theirs, you're just going to be trying to show them you love them, and they're not going to be feeling it that way. And it's our love languages are very different. And you're right. Like that conversation happens in my house a lot. Like it was, I need you to tell me. I need you to tell me. He's like, I'm really bad at remembering it, but you know how I feel. And it's like, yeah. And it's been this this is our 20-year anniversary will be this year. And so like, it's been a long journey, but now I honestly don't need it as much from him because I really am secure in our relationship. But it started with me being secure in myself first. And I know that sounds cheesy, but it's always easier to see in other people. And I can tell you, I hope my dad never listens to this, but some of the women that he has dated, it's very clear that actually, I hope he does listen to this because he puts everything on his fault for these relationships not succeeding. And it isn't him. Like these women are never going to be happy with any man because they're not happy with themselves. And it's been really painful to watch him like try to give somebody everything and they either don't trust or they just flat don't love themselves enough. And it's heartbreaking to watch them go through it. And it's heartbreaking to watch my dad like try to do everything he can to build him up. And there's nothing he can do about it.
We were talking earlier today, too, about I had listened to Think and Grow Rich and decided that I wanted to be the person that I enjoyed hanging out with. Because I told Renee, I hate that statement of love yourself. I don't know why I have an issue with it, but I just flipped it around in my head and I have to be my own best friend, basically.
I think that is a really good point. And for me, that got really clear when I had a daughter and she started being old enough to start mimicking me. Like there's no better mirror than a daughter because it doesn't matter what you tell her. It matters what you show her. And so for me, like I wanted my daughter to love herself. I wanted her to have self-care and time for herself and respect herself and ask for what she wanted and all the things. And if I wasn't doing that, like, she wasn't going to do it either. So that was a real eye-opener for me.
Along those same lines, too, I was the kid whose parents stayed together for the kids. Please don't. Please don't. I was shown exactly what a romantic relationship shouldn't be. My parents were good business partners. They were great roommates, but they didn't have a romantic relationship. And that's what was modeled to me for years and years and years about what to look for in a partner. And their excuse was always, well, we have to stay together for the kids. And I so wish that they wouldn't have, because what I learned in that is to put everything else above your own love and respect for yourself.
That's a good point. I think you're totally right. I think people stay together for a lot of reasons. And I think the only reason that you should stay together is because you love each other and you want to make that work. There are things that just you cannot get past. I do believe most people probably can figure it out, but it has to be, you have to put the work in. And I think that was one of the things that we got wrong a lot when we were younger was we get in these cycles where like, well, he didn't do this, so I'm not going to do this. And it was just this self-fulfilling prophecy where we were both pissed all the time. And now, like through some counseling and stuff, it's like, somebody's got to be that bigger person to just be like, hey, I said something dumb, or I don't know why we're fighting about this, but just taking that step to stop that cycle of just being mad. Because the longer you stay mad, the more mad you get.
And I think when you're in that mental space of being mad, you then notice all of the little things that annoy you.
Yes.
And so when that happens, you start looking at the neighbor's grass to see if it's greener. And that's something we talked about previously is my best friend's husband is incredible. We always say we love Drew because he's just amazing. He's very supportive and they have really great communication with one another. And so things that either one of them have done in the past that would have been a deal breaker weren't because of their communication with one another. And I always talk about how I'm so jealous of X, Y, and Z and, I wish that Forrest could be like this. But when it comes down to it, Drew and I would hate being in a relationship with each other. We would literally murder each other. And so it can seem so nice to look at what somebody else has and think that that's the perfect relationship. That's what I'm striving for. But it's the same thing as when you look on social media. You never actually know what's happening in other people's relationships. You can see the surface level of it, but I guarantee that they have their own issues that they have had to have conversations through. And so I think really putting in the energy, the communication, the effort into what you have already spent so much time building and growing is so much more important than holding on to a grudge or holding on to anger when they don't do a chore. Because really, if you put all of that energy into having a conversation and building it up, that problem probably won't happen to that severity ever again.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I on that note, as far as comparison, I mean, we all know that comparison is the thief of joy. But I do think, sometimes we look for our spouse to be every single thing for us, and no one person is ever going to be that. I think we have to be a lot of that for ourselves. But we had some couple friends for a while, and the husband and I were really good friends because we just talked on the same level. Like I said, my husband's not a big talker, and so it was really easy for us to get on a roll and just be like, whoa. And Josh was like, man, like you guys always seem to have great conversations. And he's like, I like feel like I fade into the background. But the real story of it was I would have never wanted to be married to any of my friends' other husbands. Like there's nobody I want to be married to other than my husband. And like you said, I would probably literally kill some of these guys if I had to be married to them. But, it's fun to have conversations once in a while. But I think that can also be a very blurry line because not everybody can keep those boundaries separate. And, it hurts people's feelings and you can easily get in bad places with that, unfortunately.
Well, and along those lines, too, of one person isn't necessarily meant to be everything for you. You have to be a lot of those things for yourself. That's also why we have friendships and why we have family and why we have all of our hobbies and our sports and the other things in our lives, because there are so many aspects of our unique individual selves that there are so many different buckets that need to be filled by different people. So like I'm going out to ladies' night with my best friend Nikki on Thursday because I want to be able to just have deep conversation. And then we're going to go see Wicked when it comes out on Friday. Would Forrest do those things with me if I asked him to? 100% he would. Would he enjoy them and thrive and have an amazing time? No, he would not. So that's why these other relationships are so important, because if I want all of my buckets to be filled and I'm relying on Forrest to fill them, he will, but then all of his buckets will be empty.
I've had this conversation with my husband because when I go out to dinner with a girlfriend, he's like, what takes y'all so long? I was already done like in 2 hours ago. And I said, well, that's not the point to be done. The point is to go catch up and to learn from each other. Are y'all friends with your significant others? Do you have like certain hobbies and things that you like to do together?
It's interesting that you ask that because Forrest and I, we ski together and we will go out on hikes together. We spend a lot of time outside together. We go rafting together. But when it comes to the time that we're really needing to like refill and re-energizing doing the things that we love, it's very much separate. Like I will go play volleyball or coach volleyball or go to the gym, and he typically will play video games with his friends, and that's how we re-energize, and we won't ever do those things together. And really making sure that you're doing the things that fill your soul, because it can be really easy to be codependent and feel like you need to be each other's partners and everything. But I do think it's really healthy to be able to be separate and do the things that fill you up. Because I know even with my best friend, like if I spend too much time with Nikki, by the end of those days, we're at each other's throats. You know, I'm like, oh my gosh, get away from me. And then after 24 hours, I'm like, I miss you so much. And I think that's how it is with Forrest too, where if we spent every waking minute of every day together, we would not get along.
We're getting ready to go on a 30-hour road trip to go help my mom and be with her for the holidays. And we actually thrive the most when we're on a trip together. We're taking our golden retriever. But other than that, I wish he liked to play games. He just does not get into like cribbage or any of the card games. I've been looking at the old Wii Fit. I loved that thing.
That was fun.
And I guess they still exist. You just have to find a newer old one.
I completely forgot about
I
that.
have one. You can have it.
Can I?
Sure.
That would be amazing. It was my favorite thing to do. I was just having this conversation with my son's girlfriends. They like to work out together, and we've been trying to find him a exercise bike that would actually fit his 6'3" frame. And it's been such a pain in the butt to be on Marketplace right now. People don't respond. They sell things out from under you. Just so annoying. But I was like, oh, what is the replacement for the Wii Fit? And she said, I think the Wii Fit's still the thing. Because there's the Nintendo Switch, not to get off
I was
subject
like,
too
what
far.
are we talking about?
We can edit that out.
Well, no, I do think it's important to have things that you like to do together, but also like Brittany said, you have to have your own things. You can't just be just that couple. I really do think it's important. And it's one of the things that I've talked to my daughter about as she's starting to navigate the dating scene with teenage boys, which is super fun, by the way. But what
Sounds so fun.
it's so fun. But it's like you gotta have your own space. Like you said, you can't just be codependent. You can't like just text each other constantly, with each other constantly. Like go do things with your friends. And she did have a boyfriend, one of her first boyfriends, that did not like her doing anything with her friends. So I'm like, huge red flag. Dump this guy right now. Like we need to be done with this. This is how many, many bad things start. Like literally hard pass for me.
And how do you teach a daughter all the different red flags that there might be? Because I did not know.
Well, the real answer is you're never going to be able to prepare them for everything. They are going to have their own struggles that are going to happen that you can't prepare them for. But the thing I always told my daughter is like, I don't have an instruction book for you. You didn't come with one. I'm going to get it wrong sometimes, but there isn't anything you and I can't figure out together. So just keep talking to me. And luckily she is really good at just talking me through things. So as some like real red flag things have come up with boyfriends, I'm able to be like, hey, like that's not okay. You know, she had a guy she was dating that, I'm going to get killed for telling this story, but for this boy was like the dream boyfriend. All the other girls were super jealous.
I have literally practiced having a conversation with Nikki that I needed to have with Forrest. So I think the more that you can talk to the women in your circle, the more that you'll learn about red flags that you maybe didn't even know about. I didn't know what a narcissistic relationship looked like until I talked to a friend of mine who was in the midst of one. And then I realized that I had been in a narcissistic relationship in high school for years and I had no idea. So I just think, like we always say on this podcast, that it's so important to have conversations about these things.
I didn't even know that I was in one either when I was married. Had never even really heard of it.
Well, that's the whole purpose of this podcast, right? Like these are the lessons nobody's teaching us in school. Maybe we didn't learn them from our parents either. And so that's why we came together to do this, to share this with everybody. And by the way, if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe. Please share this with your friends. Like our goal is to grow this because we're doing this because we want to help as many people as we can, like fast track the lessons. Like they say the only way to skip ahead in life is to learn lessons that other people already did. And that's either paying an expert or just being around people that have been through it before. And we're literally just trying to share that. I think it's more, maybe the real fairy tale doesn't exist, but I do think you build your own fairy tale. I think the more you work at your relationship and the more communication that you have and you get to know yourself and your partner, the more that fairy tale becomes to exist. But that looks different for everybody. And so you can't compare yourself to one relationship with the other. It's never going to be perfect all the time. An interesting thing, I was talking to a friend one time and we were having this conversation and she told me the opposite. She said her parents never fought. She thought they had the perfect relationship. So then when she was in a relationship and had a fight, she immediately thought it was over. Like she didn't know that was okay to have fights because she never, ever had seen her parents fight. And so now she still is kind of trying to get out of that cycle of like every time something goes wrong, she just assumes it's the end. Know that your relationship is not going to be exactly like anybody else's. And that's a good thing. But it's all about communication. And, we talked about this on another episode, but it's about asking for what you want. And that was one of my biggest lessons. Like a prime example is I would be making dinner. My husband would come home at the end of the day and like sit at the counter and be on his phone. And I would just sit there and be like pissed. Like, why isn't he just jumping in and helping me make dinner? Well, guess what? I asked him to help me one day. And you know what? He did.
Without complaining.
Without complaining. He's like, oh, yeah, sure. And so now it's kind of, over the years, we've kind of figured that out. And we make dinner together almost every night. But I could sit there and be pissed, or I could just simply ask and say, hey, would you mind helping with this or that or whatever? And he was happy to do it. So I sat there mad for how long? And I didn't need to be.
I've definitely loaded the dishwasher very aggressively before.
Right.
The other part of communication is the listening part, which I've had to work on because I'll just do all the talking and I've been told I'm bossy and don't listen. So I am learning how to actively listen and just be quiet when we're having a conversation. And it's very hard, but I'm working on it.
It's very hard. In fact, I'm sure this won't shock anybody, but I'm guilty of that as well. And my husband flat told me that he's like, you already know what you're going to say. Like whatever I'm going to say back, you're not even listening to me. You are just thinking of what your next argument is. And he was 100% right. And I've had to work on that over the years to like, don't form your argument. Don't make him wrong. That's not what it's about. Shut up and listen. And then how he feels is real.
I learned another trick from a friend too, where sometimes something is so important to you, but it's not important to the other person. And so I might be getting super worked out about something that Forrest thinks is literally doesn't matter at all. So she said to literally put it on a scale, instead of just saying, hey, can you come help me with XYZ? Say, hey, on a scale, this is like a 7 for me. What is it for you? And he might say, it's about a 2 for me. And then that can help you guys guide the conversation a little bit because he can learn why it is so important to you. You can learn why it's not important to him and then can get on the same page. And that has been something that's been really helpful for Forrest and I. If I'm like really emotionally attached to something, sometimes I don't even know why I'm so emotionally attached to it, but that's been a really helpful tool for us.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And one of the things we learned in counseling was just to say more about that or tell me more about that. And it's really hard, but it makes them say what they really are. A lot of times the first thing we say isn't the real thing, right? Like, for example, so if my husband's like, well, you never show me how much you love me. And I'm like, well, what would that look like to you? Mm-hmm. And he didn't know. Like he had to figure out what that would actually look like before I could do it. And sometimes that's the same thing for me too. Like, what am I really looking for here? What am I missing? What do I think I really, really need? Because if I don't know, he's not going to get it right. Like, you're setting unrealistic expectations. Mm-hmm.
And when you're actively listening, asking questions real helpful, and then they know that you have heard them.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, like I said, is a counseling trick. And I think this is a whole topic for another day, just counseling in general and why it's such a good thing and why literally probably everybody should do some counseling in their life. But I think counseling gives you tools, and those are the kind of things that we've learned is like how to not just escalate a fight, but to just keep it on the level where we're actually digging in and making progress instead of just getting madder.
I can talk a lot about counseling. The good, bad, and ugly.
Thank you all so much for tuning in today. Next week, we're going to be diving into a different kind of relationship, and we'll be talking about our relationship with alcohol. If something in this episode resonated with you, please share it with a friend who you think would find it helpful. Let's keep the conversation going and support each other on this journey. Here's to empowering each other, one story at a time.